Hey Alexa, is it really cold outside?
Of course it's cold outside. It's so cold that it froze the computer.
Okay, thanks. Hey, do you think we should make a video on tiny house insulation?
Of course.
Alrighty then. That's what we're gonna do. Whoa, it's cold out here. Oh, let's see if I can change this a little bit. Oh, that's better. Definitely better. Anyway, it's too cold outside to be videoing out there, so I'm in here today. Alright, but anyway, let's get on with this video talking about tiny house insulation, what you need to know, and how much insulation you need. Okay, so the first thing that I want to cover is the different types of insulation, because there's about two different types that really have the market cornered as far as insulation goes. One is a fiberglass batt insulation. There are other types that are very similar to this, but I'm just going to go with the fiberglass for the simplicity of the conversation, and that's what you're going to see most of when you go to Home Depot or Lowe's or your home improvement store. That's probably what you're going to see first. Now you can find the other types, but they're not usually as easy to find, and they're typically more expensive, but they do about the same thing. So the other type is foam insulation. Now with the foam insulation, there's two types. There's closed cell and open cell foam, and they're slightly different in what they do, but they're generally the same, so I'm going to just refer to them as the foam insulation. And then if you want to, you can look into the differences if you decide to go with foam. Let's go ahead and move to the main differences between the two. So the fiberglass insulation is the cheapest for the most part, and it's also fairly easy to install, and you can probably install it by yourself rather easily. The fiberglass will get into your skin and be really itchy, so you do have to consider that, but that's basically just adding a long sleeve shirt and you're good. So it's easy to install, and it's cheap, and it's easy to find. So that's kind of the benefits of the fiberglass insulation, but onto the foam. With the foam insulation, it's more expensive by far. It's somewhere between a few times all the way up to 11 times more expensive for the foam insulation than it is for the batt insulation. And with the foam, it gives you a lot better R value rating. And with the R value, that is basically the rating that all insulation is rated with. And it does depend on thickness, so if you have a 3-inch thick material, it's going to have a higher R value than a 1-inch thick piece of that same material. So that's the main benefit of it. There is a second benefit, and that is that it does add some rigidity to your structure. I don't know exactly how much it does add, but you are adding a extra layer of material that isn't going to be that flexible and bend, and so it's going to add some rigidity to the structure. But as I mentioned in previous videos, you can just use some strong ties and lag bolts and all that, and bolt everything together and get it all sturdy, and you really don't have to worry about that. But if that is a concern, you might want to go with the foam insulation. Now the two things that you have to consider with the foam insulation is mainly cost, and that it has to be professionally installed typically. And so with that, it costs a lot more to get that foam insulation, where you're looking at say 90 cents to $1.50 for a board foot, so about a minimum of 270 for 1x1 in a 2x4 wall. So in my tiny house, to give you an example of kind of the cost difference, it's going to be about $2,000 more to put in a foam insulation into my walls than it would be to just go with the fiberglass insulation. Because with $2,000 you can get a small solar panel setup. You can get some batteries, you can get some solar panels, you can get all the equipment that you'll need, and that'll do a pretty good job. It won't power my entire tiny house, but it will do a pretty good job at bringing your electric bills down. It might even pay for your air conditioning or heater, and then all you're left with is the other stuff. So in that case, it might be an infinite amount of time that it would take to really see the benefit of foam. You have to consider that though, because in cold weather you're probably going to want as much insulation as you can get, because with the cold weather there's not a whole lot you can do other than insulate. But in hot temperatures there are some things that you can do, and going back to those solar panels, like I was saying, on my roof they have a couple inches between the solar panel and the roof. What that does is it provides a lot of shade on my roof, so if you have solar panels or a deck or something like that up on the roof, it will cut down on the temperature that your roof insulation is having to deal with, because it's only having to really deal with ambient temperatures and not the radiation hitting the roof directly. But mentioning the roof and how that is sort of insulated by the solar panels, I should mention that the roof and the flooring are probably going to be your two weakest points. The roof because it's having the sun baked down on it, and the flooring because you probably, unless you don't have a loft or anything like that, you're probably going to have a pretty thin floor, or maybe it's a 2x4 over on its side, so you only have that 2 inches. And so you have to consider that, because if you don't have a loft, you can make that, say, a 2x4 up on its side, where you've got 4 inches, and that's quite a bit of insulation that you can put down in there. If you're parked in a specific location for a set amount of time, and it's a long enough time to justify it, you can underpin the trailer with insulation. And if you've got pipes under there that you're worried about freezing, that will help there as well and add some extra insulation to that. But ultimately it all just kind of comes down to, do you want that insulation to be really, really nice and have a really good R value? Or do you want to go with cheaper insulation that doesn't have nearly as good R value, but it allows you to, say, get solar panels or do this or that, that will then allow you to pay for some of the energy, and then that way you're not having to pay for it in insulation, you're paying for it in another way. So ultimately you're going to have to figure out which one that you want to do and then just go with that. There's a couple things that I want to mention that don't necessarily have to do with insulation itself, but it's still important if you want an insulated house. Have you ever been sitting in your house away from the door on the other side of the house, and someone opens the door and you feel that cold gust of air just rush through the house? You're like, "Oh, man." Well, that is what your windows and doors are doing constantly. Now, you're not getting a cold gust of air through the house, but it is allowing the cold or the heat to flow into your house very slowly. And how that does it is either through the actual window, just the heat transferring, or if it's not tightly sealed, you can have some air getting through that seal and warming or cooling your house when you don't want it to. So with that in mind, pick your windows carefully, because if you get a single pane window, say it's some antique window that looks really cool, that's great, but if you go and put in a ton of insulation in your house, you're kind of defeating the purpose by putting in a single pane window. So you might want to go with a double or triple pane window and seal it really well in order to have that extra layer of insulation. But that's about it for this video. So if you saw anything that I missed, go ahead and put it down in the comments so we can all learn a little bit extra today. If you liked the video, hit like. If you want to see future videos, hit subscribe and hit the bell icon for notifications. And then if you like the tiny house and living large and tiny living so much that you want to get updates that don't make it to YouTube, you can head on over to Facebook and Instagram. Follow me there at Living Large and Tiny Living, and you can get those updates as well. So that's about it for this video, so I'll catch you on the next video.